Hey guys, and welcome back to Australian Fitness Stories. So today's podcast is going to be a little bit different. I'm not actually interviewing anybody. I'm going to be sharing with you my fitness journey, particularly around my joint condition. So I am going to start right from the beginning. So I still remember my very first dislocation. So it was I was 9. So what grade's that? Grade 4, maybe? So I was 9, and there was this boy at school, and he tried to lift up my skirt. So I slapped him, and he tackled me. And when he tackled me, he dislocated my knee. And I can still remember laying on the school oval, and I was just crying. And I remember feeling the heat between like my face and the grass. And I don't know why I remember that so vividly, but I do. And that was the very first time I dislocated. That one was my knee. And then I started playing netball, which, for those of you that know much about netball, it's probably the worst sport you can play if you have knee or ankle issues, because it is a lot of stop, starting, and pivoting. So I did start playing netball, and I loved it. That was what I actually wanted to do when I was younger, is I wanted to be a professional netball player. I was playing in A grade under 18 netball when I was 12. I was very good at it, which is probably why I loved it so much. But it got to a point where every time I played, I was dislocating. I ended up having a really bad one playing indoor netball, where someone pushed me into the net and my body turned, but my feet sort of stayed the way it was facing. And I had to get taken up to the hospital in an ambulance, and my leg actually locked, bent. And then I had to have, it was like these two burly looking guys came in, and they like snapped my leg back straight again. And I had to have it in a splint for ages. And that was when my parents were basically pulled the pin on me playing netball, because I was just getting so injured. By that point, I'd already had shoulder dislocations as well, from like putting your hand up to stop the ball. And as soon as my arm would roll back, my shoulders would pop out. So yeah, it didn't get any better. So I stopped playing sport, and giving up sport, that was my release. That was my hobby. That was what I enjoyed. That was what I wanted to do with my life. So when I gave that up, my mental health went down the drain. And then that was obviously right when I was starting high school. So I had a note at school, so through high school, that excused me from having to play sport or PE for literally the entire of high school, because I couldn't run, because if I did try and run, a lot of the time my knees would dislocate and I would fall over. The kids at school were horrible. So I had heaps of them would come up behind me and like ankle tap me because my knees would dislocate and I would fall over. So then I got I used to have really bad phobias of people walking behind me. And even now, if someone's walking close behind me, like my palms will start to sweat and my heart will race. And it's honestly from the kids at school that used to try and tap my feet out from under me. Or, when you're like standing on one leg, and kids used to like knock the back of your knee to make you sort of drop a little bit. So that also would pop my knees out. So yeah, I've got my left knee's a lot worse than my right. So you will never catch me just standing on my left leg. And it's honestly because the kids at school used to knock the backs of my knees, which was really embarrassing. I used to find it embarrassing, falling over all the time at school, especially because you're usually in a skirt and then you're flashing people. But I got really good. I used to be able to, as I was falling, put my knee back in its socket before I even hit the ground. So for ages, I had giant bruises on both my hips from falling, because obviously that's where you hit the ground, because I'd be putting my knee back in. So it got that bad that it was like weekly dislocations by this point, that I was on the wait list for surgery. So the surgery that they wanted to do was I wish I had a good diagram here to show you guys, but this is your kneecap. So you've got a ligament that runs over your kneecap, so like your patella ligament, and then it attaches onto your tibia or your shin. So what they wanted to do was break my leg where the ligament attaches, move it over, screw it back down to try and pull the kneecap in because mine dislocate out. So because I was still so young, so I was only 15ish at this point, my growth plates were still open in my legs. So if they had have broken my leg, that leg would have stopped growing, and then I would have ended up with uneven legs. So every 6 months I used to get x-rays, and they would look at my growth plates. And then when I was 16, those growth plates closed. So they're like, yep, like you're good for the surgery. And I went in and I got this surgery done. It's called a tibial tuberosity transfer. And honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. They wanted to do both my knees, but I only did one. Obviously, I was only going to do one at a time anyway. But my recovery was so rough that I ended up saying no, that I didn't want them to do the other one. And the one that they didn't do the surgery on is actually my better knee. Go figure. So they did say when they did the surgery that I'd have a scar about this big, and that I'd have a numb spot about the size of a 10-cent piece on the side of my leg. And when I woke up, my scar is about this big. It's hard for me to get my leg up here because I'm very pregnant, so I can't show you, but it literally runs down the whole front of my knee, very similar to a knee replacement scar. And I have no feeling down this whole side of my leg. So it was definitely a lot bigger than a 10-cent piece. Not that the lack of feeling bothers me, to be honest, but yeah, the surgery was rough. I was in a metal splint for 6 months, hobbling around everywhere. So one of my other friends at school, she ended up getting a hip replacement, not at this point, but before she'd gotten a hip replacement. So she walked really uneven. And I was obviously in a metal splint, so I walked uneven. So people used to call us like the pirates, which was actually really hurtful at the time. Can kind of laugh about it now, maybe. I don't know, kids are cruel, but yeah, that was rough. So because people used to try and trip you and everything, and I was on crutches, I used to just wait until everyone had gone to class at lunch, and then I'd walk there and just be late. So I didn't have people behind me tripping me while I was trying to get around when I had this stupid metal splint on. So because my leg obviously was isolated for so long, a lot of the muscle in my leg wasted away. So by the end of the 6 months, my leg was like this skinny, wasted away, floppy, absolute nothing. So I got told, like, obviously I had to do rehab. So when we took the metal splint off, because it had been straight for so long, all of my ligaments had seized in my leg. So we had to do all of these exercises to try and re-stretch all my ligaments to get bend back in my knee. So they did initially say that I probably wouldn't get more than 90-degree bend, but I ended up getting, I think it was about 130. So when you see people that are sitting on their feet, like my foot can't touch all the way to my butt, it doesn't bend that far. It's probably about this far off, which is better than what they were expecting. But I did put a lot of time into my physio, and I was also seeing a PT to try and build some of the muscle back in my leg. And that was how I actually got into the gym. Was the best advice that the doctors gave me, because I was obviously dislocating everywhere, was to build up my muscle as much as I could to try and hold my body together, because my ligaments are so loose that they don't hold my joints together. So in all of my dislocations, I haven't torn any ligaments. They just stretch, very stretchy, which I honestly don't know if that's better or worse. So I was supposed to get a shoulder reconstruction on this side. So my shoulders got so bad that they would dislocate in my sleep. So you know how when you're sleeping and you sort of put your arms up above your head, mine would relax and then like pop out. And then usually it would work its way into my dream. So I'd be having a dream, and in my dream, I'd have dislocated like my shoulder or my knee, and I was like trying to put it back in and I couldn't. And then I'd finally wake up, and it's because it was actually dislocated in real life. So I used to have a fear when I was younger of ever having a partner, because I was so scared about having to sleep next to somebody when I would already dislocate myself so much in my own sleep. I was worried having someone next to me that like they would be doing it as well, which obviously is not an issue now, thank God. But that was something that I used to be really afraid of growing up, was how I'd ever sleep next to a partner. So I was supposed to get a shoulder reconstruction because it was dislocating so badly, but I totally chickened out. I was this would have been when I was maybe 19 or 20. I was supposed to get that done, but I didn't. I was scared to take the time off work, and kind of just really scared of the surgery, to be honest, and worried that it would make it worse, because the surgery they did on my knee, I feel like it made it worse. So I've also got really bad arthritis in both my knees from all of the dislocations as well. So squatting is something I don't do very often, purely because of the pain. It feels like someone's shooting me in the kneecap. So I don't do a lot of squatting, but you can work around injuries, which is something I love about training, is you can definitely work around it. So chicken out of my shoulder recon, and then just put a lot of time into going back to the basics, using bands, strengthening my rotator cuffs to actually stabilize my joints. And I can honestly say that the strength training has changed my life. So I would easily have done at least probably 300 dislocations in each knee, maybe 200-ish dislocations on this shoulder, and maybe only 50 on this one. This one was always a bit better. My hips haven't popped out, but I was born with like the loose hips as a baby, because again, it's just a genetic condition that I've got. So my mum's had dislocations and my grandma's had dislocations, not as severe as mine. It seems to get worse with each generation. So I am really hoping that I do not give my joints to my baby. I'm hoping she gets Tommy's genetics there. For a while, they thought I might have had lupus, like an autoimmune disease, and it attacking itself, but they did all the tests and they ruled that out. And they just said it was like a hyper joint mobility, and it just is what it is. So no netball, probably should have done gymnastics, but strength training, life-changing. So I still can't play sport. And I think that was what I really loved about competing, is it was the closest thing for me to a team sport, because I love sport, and I can't really do that. And gym itself is quite a solo individual thing, but when you're actually competing, it's kind of like a little community of people that gym. So that's one thing that I've always loved about competing, is the team aspect of it, even though you're actually competing against each other. So it sounds really weird saying that it's a team sport, but it feels like it on the day. It feels very teamy. But yeah, that's what really got me into the gym. And now, like, if someone was chasing me, I could run. Probably without dislocating. I would just probably get a lot of swelling from the arthritis, but it probably wouldn't dislocate now. I don't dislocate in my sleep anymore. My shoulders, I don't think I've dislocated anything now for probably, I reckon, close to 3 years, which is incredible. For me, the last thing I dislocated actually was my shoulder. I was doing a really heavy shoulder dumbbell press. I think I had something ridiculous in each hand, like it was 20 something kilos, might have been 28 kilos in each hand, and the weight rolled backwards, and it just took my shoulder with it, and dropped the weight in the gym, had to put my shoulder back, bawling my eyes out. Like, look, it hurts, but I think a lot of those tears was just because I was so embarrassed. Everyone watching in the gym of me putting my body back together and dropping the weights. I think, and like, I know I shouldn't feel embarrassed for dislocating, but I don't know, I do. I'm sensitive about it, so I do get a bit embarrassed. And that's probably, I reckon it took me about a year to feel confident shoulder pressing again, because I would go to do it and I would start sweating because I'd be so nervous that my shoulder was going to do that again. So if you ever watch me do shoulder presses, you'll notice that I always have the weights further forwards. So there's no chance of them rolling backwards ever again. But touching wood, 3 years and everything has stayed together. But that is also because I have gotten really good at not doing things that I know are risky. And also because I've drank a lot less in the last 3 years. Like, obviously, when you're out drinking, you tend to be a little bit more reckless and do things and jump over things or kick things or dancing or being on uneven ground. And a lot of that did me no favors when it came to dislocations. Alcohol and me is a terrible combo. But yeah, now it's not so bad. It's definitely something that I manage. The arthritis is a pain, and it does, like, it does frustrate me when I see people do things like box jumps, because there is no way my knees would do that. Mentally, I can't even push myself to do it mentally, because I know how much it would hurt to do it, that I can't even do it. Mentally, I can't. So there are so many exercises that I wish I could do, and my quads are always going to be underdeveloped because I can't do a lot of the exercises that load my quads because of the pain and inflammation that I get through my knees. But it is what it is. And I feel like I've learned definitely to work around it, and that there are ways to work around it. Like, I wish I could go back and chat to my younger self, because I took it so badly. And a lot of the kids at school just thought I was lazy, I think. And I remember when we had like netball tryouts at school, and a heap of the girls were like, you should try out, like, you should definitely join it. I had to be like, no, like, I can't. And them trying to convince me to do it, like, I walked home bawling my eyes out. A lot of the sports days and sports carnivals, I used to skip school and leave, because sitting there and watching everyone do things that I couldn't do, it used to break me, to be honest. I don't like not being able to do things, and it was something where going to hospital over it wasn't worth the injury and the rehab all over again. So yeah, I don't know, I struggled a lot. So I feel like that definitely played a really big role in why I was so mentally unstable as a teenager. Yeah, I won't go too much into it because I feel like it's a little bit too dark for this episode. But yeah, I did really struggle, and I feel like that was a huge part of it. But it just goes to show the benefits of strength training when it comes to joint instability. And it has given me a whole new lease on life. Like, I can walk around, because it used to dislocate when I walked. If I was walking in a straight line and someone said something to me, if I turned my head while I was walking, that was literally all it took, was that slight shift in the way my weight like loaded, and my knees were gone. So it's definitely a lot better than that. But you learn to live with it. And yeah, I feel like compared to other people, it could definitely be a lot worse. So counting the blessings, and look, I'm hoping that there's better technology as I get older, because I'm going to need knee replacements bad. So I don't love the ones that are around at the moment. So I'm hoping they bring out some really cool bionic stuff by the time I'm getting that done. But yeah, that's my fitness story and how I got into the gym. Any questions, drop them below. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in to this week's fitness stories with me.